The dog's paws crunched through the frosted leaves as she darted ahead, her dark fur blending with the shadows of the trees. Marcus followed close behind, pulling his worn jacket tighter around his chest. His breath came out in white bursts, his legs aching from the climb. "Shadow, slow down," he called, his voice rasping from the cold. But the dog didn't stop. She barked again, short, sharp, urgent. Something had her attention. Marcus hesitated for a second. He didn't like the woods this far from the city, too quiet, too empty. But Shadow had fed him more than once, dragging him to trash bins behind restaurants, sniffing out half-eaten meals when he hadn't eaten in 2 days. If she wanted to go somewhere, there was a reason. He stumbled over a root and nearly fell. The ground here was damp, the air thick with the smell of wet soil and old leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a crow screamed. When he finally caught up, Shadow was standing still, her tail low, nose pressed against something near a fallen oak. Marcus frowned. It looked like an old, rusted box, half buried under the dirt and roots. "What you got there, girl?" he muttered, crouching beside her. He brushed away the dirt with his hands, numb, cracked, filthy from years on the street. The box was metal, dented, the latch still locked. Someone had wrapped it with a strip of plastic. He tugged once. It didn't budge. He found a rock, smashed the lock open, and lifted the lid. Inside was silence. Then his heart started to hammer. Bundles of cash, stacks of it, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands, wrapped in rubber bands, still clean, still crisp. For a long moment, Marcus just stared. His throat went dry. The only sound was the trembling of the leaves above and the faint panting of the dog beside him. "This ain't real," he whispered. "No way this is real." He touched one bundle, expecting it to vanish, but it was solid. The paper felt warm from his skin. Shadow whined softly and nudged his arm, as if sensing his confusion. Marcus looked around. The forest stretched endless in every direction, dark trunks, patches of mist, no sign of another soul. "Who the hell leaves this out here?" he said under his breath. His mind was spinning. Maybe drug money, maybe stolen, maybe someone's trap. He pushed the lid shut and sat back against the tree, rubbing his face with trembling hands. He hadn't held more than a few dollars in years. Some nights he'd sold empty bottles just to buy bread, and now this. Enough to change everything, enough to finally stop waking up hungry, enough to maybe see his daughter again, if she still remembered his name. The thought made his chest ache. Then, headlights. A faint glow moved between the trees in the distance. Marcus froze. His first thought, police. His second, worse. Shadow started growling, low and deep. Marcus grabbed her by the collar and pulled her behind the trunk. They crouched there motionless, the cold bark pressing into his back. The light grew brighter, then stopped. A car door slammed. Voices, 2 of them. Male. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp, angry. Someone kicked the dirt. Another curse followed. Then, suddenly, silence again. Marcus held his breath. Minutes passed before the engine started. The headlights turned, slowly disappearing down a dirt path until nothing but darkness remained. Only then did Marcus move. He glanced at the box again. Every instinct screamed to leave it, to walk away and never look back. But he couldn't. Something inside him refused. He wrapped the money in his torn blanket and stuffed it under his coat. The metal scraped his ribs as he stood. "Come on, girl," he whispered, his voice shaking. "We gotta go." Shadow barked once, quiet but alert. Together they slipped back through the trees, their figures swallowed by the night. Behind them, the forest settled into stillness again, like it had never given up its secret. By the time Marcus reached the bridge, the city had swallowed the night. Cars hummed above him, their headlights tracing lines across the concrete. He sat down under the same spot he'd called home for nearly 2 years. Beside an old mattress, a few plastic bags, and a rusted cart filled with bottles. Shadow curled up next to him, her head resting on his leg. She always did that when he was quiet for too long. The box lay in front of him, hidden beneath his jacket. He stared at it like it might explode. He thought he'd forgotten what fear felt like. But tonight, it came crawling back. Years ago, Marcus Reed had been someone. He used to wake up at 6:30 every morning to the sound of his daughter laughing. Alyssa loved cartoons. She'd sit on the couch in her pajamas, legs swinging, waiting for him to make pancakes. His wife, Denise, would always roll her eyes at the mess they made in the kitchen, pretending to be mad. He'd worked as a mechanic at Reed's Auto Repair, his own shop, small but steady. The place smelled of oil and burnt rubber, but to Marcus it smelled like life. He'd earned every tool, every socket, every loyal customer with his hands. He'd been proud, until the accident. It was a Saturday night, rain, headlights, and 1 second of distraction. Denise's car never made it through the intersection. Marcus remembered the sound, metal folding like paper, the smell of gasoline, the screaming, and then silence. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Alyssa had survived with a broken arm. Denise hadn't. When he was discharged, he couldn't step into the shop again. The air felt too heavy, every noise too sharp. He started drinking to fall asleep and drank more to wake up. Bills piled up. Customers stopped coming. Within 6 months, the shop was gone. Within a year, so was his house. He tried to keep Alyssa, but the court didn't listen to a man with no job, no home, and a record of public intoxication. They took her away, temporarily, they said. He remembered standing on the courthouse steps, watching the car drive off with his daughter in the back seat, her small hand pressed against the window. That was the last time he saw her. He drifted between shelters, underpasses, and train stations. At first he thought he'd find work again. He still carried his arsum in a torn folder for a while, like a piece of his old self. But after enough rejections, he stopped trying. One night, while searching for food behind a diner, he heard a soft whimper from a cardboard box. Inside, a trembling puppy, ribs showing, eyes wide with fear. "Hey there, little one," he'd whispered. She'd looked up at him and licked his finger. He'd named her Shadow because she followed him everywhere from that day on. Through winter and rain, she slept curled against his chest, keeping him warm when he couldn't afford a blanket. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't completely alone. Now, as he stared at the metal box in front of him, the past weighed heavy on his shoulders. He thought about all those years lost, the mistakes, the people who turned away, the ones he couldn't save. And now fate had handed him this, a box full of money out of nowhere. "Maybe this is it," he whispered. "Maybe this is my second chance." Shadow raised her head at the sound of his voice. Her eyes reflected the faint orange glow from the streetlight above. Marcus reached down, rubbing her fur. "What do you think, girl? We could get a place, real food, maybe even—" He stopped. The thought of Alyssa's face flashed through his mind again. She'd be, 16 by now? Maybe 17? He wondered if she'd even recognize him. He sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Or maybe it's a curse," he muttered. "Nothing this good ever comes without a catch." Somewhere above, a siren wailed, sharp and distant. Marcus watched it fade through the dark, then looked back down at the box. The lock was broken. He'd smashed it open himself. There was no going back now. He unwrapped a single stack of bills, the paper smooth and new against his calloused hands. $10,000, maybe more. Enough to disappear, enough to become someone else. But deep down, he knew disappearing wasn't the same as being free. He looked at Shadow. She tilted her head, her tail thumping softly against the ground. "Let's sleep on it," he said, though he knew he wouldn't. He wrapped the box back in his coat, lay down beside the dog, and stared at the cold underside of the bridge. Above them, the world went on, cars, laughter, warm windows glowing against the night. And under it, Marcus tried to convince himself he hadn't already made a decision. Morning came slow and gray. The city was waking up, buses roaring, engines echoing off the concrete. Marcus hadn't slept. His back ached, his throat was dry, and his mind wouldn't stop racing. The box sat in front of him, still wrapped in his coat. He'd spent the entire night staring at it, waiting for the courage to decide what to do. Shadow stretched beside him, yawning, tail thumping against the ground. "Yeah, I know," Marcus muttered, rubbing his temples. "You think I'm crazy." He looked down at the stack of bills he'd pulled out earlier. The sight still didn't feel real. A fortune, sitting under a bridge beside a man who didn't even have 2 matching shoes. He opened the lid again. The smell of paper and plastic hit him. It wasn't just money. It was clean, untouched, like it had never been used. He lifted one bundle, then another. Beneath the stacks, something else glinted. a folded piece of paper, slightly damp around the edges. He unfolded it carefully. Numbers, letters, a few initials, TM and LD. Then a date, last month. He frowned. What the hell is this? Shadow sniffed at the paper, then sneezed. Marcus's mind spun with possibilities. Maybe the box was part of a robbery. Maybe someone buried it and never came back. Maybe whoever was in those woods last night was looking for this exact thing. He closed the lid again, his heartbeat rising. Later that day, he made his way downtown. He carried the box in a trash bag, keeping his hands in his pockets, eyes down. The people around him didn't look twice, just another homeless man with garbage. He stopped behind an old factory by the river. No one ever came here. The walls were covered in graffiti, the windows boarded up. He found a loose plank near the foundation, pried it open, and shoved the box inside. There, he whispered. Safe. He stayed there for a while, just listening, to the river, to the wind, to the hum of the city that barely noticed he existed. Shadow lay beside him, watching his every move. She didn't trust the place, her ears flicking at every sound. Don't worry, he said softly. We'll figure this out. But he wasn't sure he believed himself. 2 days passed. Marcus tried to live normally, as normal as a man on the streets could. He begged at intersections, collected cans, shared a sandwich with Shadow, but his thoughts kept circling back to that box. At night, when he lay down, he imagined walking into a store with clean clothes, buying a hot meal, renting a room, maybe even getting a phone. It felt dangerous just to dream it. He told himself he'd take a little, just a few hundred, to get on his feet. He'd keep the rest hidden, maybe use it to start over somewhere far away. That afternoon he slipped back to the factory. The box was still there, untouched. He took one bundle, $10,000, and tucked it into his jacket. Shadow barked once, like she disapproved. Don't look at me like that, he said. It's not stealing if no one wants it. Still, his hands were shaking as he left. He went straight to a thrift store, bought a new coat, jeans, and a pair of boots that actually fit. For the first time in years, he looked at himself in a cracked mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. He didn't look rich, just alive. He bought Shadow a leash, a small toy, and a can of real dog food. Watching her eat it, tail wagging, nearly broke him. For a few brief hours, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. But peace never lasts long on the streets. That night, while sitting outside a diner finishing his coffee, he saw it. A black SUV slowing down across the street. 2 men inside, talking, eyes scanning the sidewalks. They didn't look like cops. Marcus froze, the paper cup halfway to his lips. One of them got out, tall, in a dark jacket, eyes hidden behind sunglasses even though it was night. He showed a photo to a man sitting nearby. The man shook his head. Marcus's stomach turned cold. He couldn't see the picture, but he didn't have to. He knew. Shadow growled quietly, ears flat. Easy, girl, he whispered. Easy. He stood up, trying to look casual, and walked down the street. The SUV followed. At the next corner, he turned fast into an alley, pulling Shadow along. His boots splashed through puddles. Behind him, he heard the low growl of an engine, then the squeal of tires. He ducked behind a dumpster, pressing his back against the wall, heart pounding so loud it hurt. The SUV slowed, paused, then rolled past. Marcus waited a full 5 minutes before moving. When he finally stepped out, his face was pale, his hands trembling. Jesus Christ, he muttered. They're looking for it. He pulled out the folded paper from the box, the one with the initials. It was the only clue. Maybe it could tell him who those men were. He had no plan, no allies, and no idea who to trust. But he knew one thing. The box wasn't safe anymore. That night he returned to the river to move it. The rain had started again, turning the ground to mud. Shadow barked nervously as he dug the box free, wrapping it in plastic. Lightning cracked across the sky. For a moment Marcus caught his reflection in the river, his face worn, eyes tired, clothes soaked. He looked like a man standing on the edge of something too big to handle. He lifted the box and whispered, "We'll find somewhere else, girl, somewhere no one will ever think to look." Shadow barked once in reply, and together they disappeared into the rain. For the next few days, Marcus didn't sleep more than a few hours at a time. He kept moving, one night under a bridge, another behind a bus station, always with the box close by. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the men in that black SUV, the way they scanned the streets, the way one of them smiled as he spoke to people, polite but cold. They were hunting, and Marcus knew what they were after. One evening he stopped at the camp near the river, a place where a few of the city's homeless gathered for warmth and company. Someone always had a small fire going, and there was safety in numbers. "Hey, Reed," a voice called as he approached. It was Frankie, an older man with a gray beard and missing teeth. "Haven't seen you in days, brother. Thought maybe you got lucky and found a house." Marcus tried to smile. "Something like that." Frankie chuckled, then coughed hard into his sleeve. "You look nervous, man. What's going on?" Marcus shrugged, glancing over his shoulder. "Just keeping low." They sat by the fire for a while, eating from a can of beans someone had heated. The smoke stung Marcus's eyes, but it felt good, human. That was when he saw it again, the SUV, parked across the river, headlights off, just sitting there. His chest tightened. "Frankie," he whispered, "you see that car?" Frankie turned. "Yeah, been there on and off all week. Couple of dudes in suits asking questions, about a box or something. Said there's a reward." Marcus froze. "They talked to you?" "Yeah, asked if I knew a tall black guy with a dog." Frankie squinted at him. "I told him no." Marcus swallowed hard. "You didn't—" "I didn't say nothing, man," Frankie interrupted. "But you better be careful. They mean business. Yesterday they roughed up that kid who sleeps by the bridge." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, roughed up?" Frankie poked the fire with a stick, his face grim. "Beat him half to death. Said he was lying." That night Marcus moved again. He carried the box in his arms like it was alive. Shadow trotted beside him, ears low, silent. Every noise, every echo of footsteps made his heart race. He walked for miles, through alleys, across the old train yard, until he found a half-collapsed warehouse on the edge of town. Broken windows, graffiti, piles of rusted metal. Perfect. No one would come here. He spread a blanket on the floor and sat down, breathless. "We'll stay here for a while," he told Shadow. "Just a few days." The dog didn't answer, of course, but her eyes said everything. She didn't like this place. Hours passed. The rain started again, pattering against the roof. Marcus tried to rest, but something gnawed at him, the paper from the box. He took it out again, holding it under the weak light of his flashlight. The initials, the date, the strange sequence of numbers. It looked like some kind of bank code or record. He remembered what Frankie said, a reward. He doubted those men were offering any reward that didn't end with a bullet. But maybe the police? Maybe they could trace this paper. He laughed bitterly. A homeless man walking into a station with a box of stolen money? They'd lock him up before he finished the first sentence. Still, doing nothing didn't feel safe anymore. He needed to know what he was dealing with. The next morning, he wrapped the paper in plastic, left the box hidden under a sheet of metal, and walked toward the city. He'd been to the public library before, warm, quiet, no one asked questions. He sat at one of the computers, fingers stiff and trembling, and typed the initials into the search bar. TMLD robbery. The first result made his blood run cold. Armed robbery. Armored truck stolen, suspects at large. Police suspect 2 men connected to violent crimes across the state. The article had photos, blurry security footage, 2 men wearing masks, carrying rifles, forcing guards to the ground. Marcus's stomach twisted. He scrolled further. The date matched the one on the paper. The report said the robbers escaped with $250,000 in cash, and the money had not been recovered. He whispered, "Oh, God." Shadow whined softly under the table. Marcus clicked through a few more links, but it was all the same. Stolen money, suspects unknown, and a warning that the men were considered armed and extremely dangerous. He shut the computer off and sat there, his pulse hammering. The box in that warehouse wasn't a miracle. It was stolen blood money. He looked up, and for a second he froze. Outside the glass wall of the library, across the street, the black SUV. His throat went dry. One of the men from the photo, older now, but unmistakable, stood beside it, talking on a phone. They'd found him. Marcus moved fast. He grabbed Shadow by the collar and slipped toward the back exit. His hands shook so badly he dropped his bag once, almost tripping. A voice shouted from behind, maybe the librarian, maybe not. He didn't look back. He ran through the alley behind the building, the cold wind cutting through his jacket. Shadow kept up beside him, silent and focused. Behind them, the SUV's tires screeched. Marcus turned the corner, heart pounding, ducked behind a dumpster, then crawled through a gap in the fence leading into an empty lot. He stayed down until the sound of the engine faded into the distance. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold Shadow's leash. "They know," he whispered. "They know I got it." That night, he didn't go back to the warehouse. He hid in an abandoned subway tunnel near the edge of town. The air was cold and damp, but it was better than being seen. Shadow curled against him, trembling from exhaustion. Marcus stared into the dark and whispered, "We should have never opened that box." But he knew it was too late to close it now. For the next 2 days, Marcus barely left the tunnel. He rationed the last of his canned food, shared a little with Shadow, and stayed quiet. Every sound, dripping water, echoing footsteps, made his muscles tense. He kept replaying everything in his mind, the robbery, the initials on the paper, the men in the SUV. It all connected. He wasn't just running from strangers anymore. He was running from killers. But he couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'd find him. On the third morning, when the sun barely touched the mouth of the tunnel, Marcus packed his things. He hid the box again, this time deeper underground beneath a pile of broken concrete, and covered it with a piece of tarp. He marked the spot with a rusty metal rod, something only he would notice. Then he walked out, pulling his hood low over his face. He needed answers. And there was only one place where people talked about things like this, a small diner near the industrial zone, open 24 hours, where truckers and construction workers came in after night shifts. When Marcus entered, the smell of grease and coffee hit him. The waitress barely glanced at him. She'd seen worse. He sat at the far corner, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, just coffee, and listened. 2 men at the counter were talking about the same case. "Crazy story," one of them said. "That armored truck job. Turns out one of the guards went missing after. Cops think he helped them." "Yeah, I heard. But they found one of the robbers dead last month, burned up in some cabin. The other one's still out there." Marcus's ears pricked up. One dead, one alive. He thought of the man in the SUV, the one outside the library. That must have been him. If the money was stolen years ago, maybe the survivor hid it and got caught up in something else later. But then, how did the box end up buried in the lot? He needed to know who the guard was. Maybe that was the key. When night fell, Marcus went back to the library, this time from the rear entrance, hood pulled tight, moving fast. The place was almost empty. He took a seat at a different computer and started searching again. After an hour of digging through local news archives, he found it. Armored truck guard missing after robbery. Suspected accomplice. The name hit him like a punch. Leroy Daniels. He stared at the screen. Daniels. LD. Those were the same initials on the paper, so the note wasn't random. It was a signature. The money must have belonged to Leroy. Marcus scrolled further. The article said Daniels was a 45-year-old security guard, divorced, with one son. After the robbery, he vanished. No record of his arrest, no confirmed death, just gone. Marcus leaned back, whispering, "Maybe he buried it and never came back." Shadow nudged his leg softly, as if she felt his unease. He looked around. Every shadow in the library seemed to move. Marcus printed the article, old habits from his days working as a janitor at a courthouse. Always keep proof. Then he left, walking through the empty streets toward the bridge. But when he reached the corner near the gas station, his stomach clenched. The SUV, again. Engine running, lights off, parked in the dark. He turned quickly into an alley, crouched behind a trash bin, and listened. 2 doors opened. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. A voice, low, cold. "Check the alleys, he's close." Marcus pressed his hand against Shadow's muzzle to keep her quiet. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. Another voice, rough, impatient. "You sure it's him?" Library camera caught him. Same jacket, same dog. Marcus swallowed hard. They had footage. That meant they were watching every place he'd been. He waited until the footsteps faded, then slipped deeper into the maze of alleys, moving fast and silent. By the time he reached the old train yard again, his legs were shaking from exhaustion. He ducked behind an overturned freight car and collapsed to the ground, gasping. Shadow licked his hand. "I can't do this forever," he murmured. "They're everywhere." He thought about the police again. Maybe if he showed them the article, told them everything, the box, the men, the robbery, they'd believe him. But then he imagined the cuffs, the cold bench, the questions he couldn't answer. A homeless man claiming he found $200,000? No one would believe him. Hours later, as the first light of dawn broke, Marcus heard a sound. Footsteps again, but lighter this time. He raised his head, alert. A figure appeared at the far end of the yard, not one of the men in black. A woman wearing a long coat, camera slung around her neck. She looked out of place, careful where she stepped. Marcus stayed still, watching. She stopped, took a few pictures of the graffiti, then turned and froze when she saw him. Their eyes met. She hesitated, then said softly, "I'm not here to hurt you." Marcus said nothing. His body was tense, ready to run. "I'm a journalist," she said. "My name's Claire. I've been following that robbery story. I think you might have something I need." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Who told you about me?" "Let's just say," she replied, glancing around, "you're not the only one they're watching." They stood there in silence for a long time. The wind moved through the rusted cars, the city waking in the distance. Finally, Marcus said, "If you know who they are, then you know what they'll do to anyone who talks." Claire nodded slowly. "Yes, that's why we have to talk before they find you." Shadow growled softly. Marcus took a deep breath, weighing every word. He could run again, or trust her. Either way, the clock was ticking. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fog from the river crawled over the tracks, curling around the rusted wheels and broken concrete. Marcus stared at her, searching for a trap in her calm face. She didn't look like one of them. No black coat, no earpiece, no cold eyes. Still, he'd learned that appearances meant nothing. "I don't talk to strangers," he said finally. "I'm not just a stranger," Claire replied. "I'm the only one trying to find out what really happened that night. The robbery, the missing guard, Leroy Daniels. You've heard that name, haven't you?" Marcus's breath caught. He said nothing, but she saw it in his eyes. Claire lowered her voice. "They're after you because you found what he hid. I think he tried to expose them and got killed for it." Marcus turned his head sharply. "Killed? I didn't see anything about that." "There wouldn't be," she said. "No body, no report. But I've been digging for months. Leroy was supposed to testify against someone, his own company, the security firm that moved that cash. Then he disappeared. The same firm's CEO was arrested for laundering money through fake contracts 2 years later. You see where this goes?" Marcus rubbed his face. "I don't want to see where it goes. I just want to live." Claire stepped closer. "If you keep running, you won't. They already know your face, Marcus. The only way out is to make it public. Tell the truth before they silence you." Shadow barked once, a short, sharp sound, as if echoing the warning. Marcus looked away, heart pounding. He'd been invisible for years, and for once that had kept him alive. Now this woman wanted to drag him back into the light, but she was right. He couldn't hide forever. He took a slow breath. "What do you want from me?" "Just your story," she said, "and the proof that the money exists." He hesitated. "If I show you, you'll write it up. They'll see it, and I'll be dead before the paper hits the street." "Not if we do it smart," she said. "We make copies, send them to every outlet in town. Once it's out, they can't kill you, not without drawing attention." Marcus gave a bitter laugh. "You really think anyone cares if a homeless man disappears?" Claire met his eyes. "I do." Something in her tone, steady, sincere, broke through his doubt. He nodded slowly. "Fine, but if you screw me over—" "I won't," she said softly. "You have my word." They waited until night to move. Claire parked her car 2 blocks from the train yard and walked with him through the dark, carrying a flashlight wrapped in red film to keep the beam low. Marcus led her down into the tunnel, to the spot where the box lay buried beneath concrete. When they dug it out, Claire's eyes widened. "God, it's real." Marcus said nothing, just brushed the dirt off the lid. He didn't like how heavy the air felt, like something watching from the dark. Claire took pictures quickly, then closed the lid again. I'll blur the serial numbers before publishing. They'll know we found it, but not where it is." "You're really going to put this out there?" Marcus asked quietly. She nodded. "Tomorrow. But tonight we need to disappear. I have a safe place. A friend who used to work for the paper. He owes me." They reached her car at dawn. Marcus looked around, scanning the street. No SUV, no shadows. For the first time in days, it almost felt safe. He got into the passenger seat, Shadow curled up on the floor between them, and they drove through the gray city. "Why do you care so much?" he asked after a while. Claire smiled sadly. "My brother used to work the night shift at that same company. He died in a warehouse accident 6 years ago. No investigation. Just another name on a form. Leroy was the only one who reached out to me back then. He told me something big was coming. I think this," she nodded toward the road, "is what he meant." Marcus fell silent. The city blurred past the window. Broken billboards, empty lots, forgotten lives. "You think he left the box for you?" he asked. She shook her head. "Maybe not for me. Maybe for whoever still had a conscience." They reached a rundown building on the edge of town, a closed-down print shop. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust. Claire led him upstairs to a small room with an old couch, a kettle, and a laptop. "This is it," she said. "Home, for now." Marcus sank into the couch. It was softer than any bed he'd had in years. Shadow curled beside him, tail flicking in sleep. Claire plugged in her laptop, transferring photos and typing notes fast, like she'd done it 1,000 times. After a while, she said, "Once this goes online, you'll be famous." Marcus gave a dry laugh. "Fame's not what I need, I just want peace." She smiled faintly. "Maybe this is your way to get it." Hours passed. Marcus dozed off for the first time in days. When he woke, the sun was already setting, painting the cracked walls orange. Claire was still working, eyes glued to the screen. He stood, stretched, and then froze. Outside, down on the street, a dark vehicle had pulled up, black SUV. His blood turned cold. He rushed to the window. 2 men stepped out, scanning the area. Claire looked up, saw his face, and whispered, "No, not now." "They found us," Marcus said, voice low. She shut the laptop, shoved it in a bag. "Back exit, now." They moved fast, through a narrow hallway, and out a metal door that led to the alley. But as they turned the corner, Marcus saw the glint of a gun under one man's coat. Shadow growled, teeth bared. Claire whispered, "Don't run, they'll shoot." Marcus took a step back, eyes darting. "We need a distraction." He spotted a stack of old newspapers by the door, grabbed a handful, and tossed them toward the men, then kicked over a trash can. The sound echoed loud, metal on concrete. "Go!" he shouted. They sprinted down the alley. Bullets cracked behind them. Claire stumbled. Marcus grabbed her arm, dragging her behind a dumpster. Shadow barked furiously, lunging toward the sound. Brave, loyal, unafraid. "Shadow, no!" Marcus yelled, but it was too late. The dog darted toward the men. A shot rang out. Marcus froze. Everything stopped. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the alley like a scream that wouldn't end. Marcus felt it hit his chest. Not the bullet, but something deeper, sharper. He turned. Shadow lay on the ground, still breathing, a faint whimper escaping her throat. "No!" Marcus ran to her, dropping to his knees, his hands trembling as he touched her fur. Warm blood seeped between his fingers. Claire pulled at his shoulder. "Marcus, we have to move." He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the dog. "She saved us." The men were getting closer, their boots slamming against the pavement. Marcus bent low, whispering into Shadow's ear, "You did good, girl. You did real good." Her breathing slowed. One last exhale, then nothing. The world fell silent. Something inside Marcus snapped. He turned, eyes burning. "You killed her," he said, his voice low, cold, terrifying in its calm. Claire gripped his arm, pulling him toward the far end of the alley. "Please, Marcus, she'd want you to live." He didn't move for a moment. Then, finally, he stood, slowly, like a man carrying a lifetime of weight, and followed her. They darted through the back streets, cutting across an abandoned lot until they reached the river. The sound of sirens in the distance made Marcus look up. "Police?" Claire asked, breathless. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe them." They ran until their legs burned. By the time they reached an old bridge, The SUV was gone. Either they'd lost them, or the men were waiting somewhere else. Marcus dropped to the ground, exhausted. His hands were shaking. Claire crouched beside him. "We can't stop. They'll come again." He didn't answer. His eyes were still fixed on nothing, lost in the emptiness Shadow had left behind. "She was all I had," he whispered. Claire looked at him, her expression softening. "Then make her sacrifice mean something. Help me finish this." He turned to her. "How?" "By ending what Leroy started, by showing the world what really happened." They found shelter in an abandoned bus under the bridge. Claire opened her laptop, her fingers trembling as she typed. Marcus watched the screen glow in the dark like a small piece of hope refusing to die. She uploaded the photos, the box, the cash, the initials, everything. Then she attached her article, short but sharp. The missing money, the silenced whistleblower, and the homeless man who found the truth. When she hit publish, the screen froze for a moment, then confirmed, uploaded. Claire exhaled. "It's done." Marcus sat in silence. "So, now what?" "Now," she said, "we wait." But the world didn't wait long. By morning, the story exploded online. The photos spread across social media. Local news picked it up, then national. People debated whether it was real, if the homeless man was even alive. Claire's inbox flooded with messages, some offering protection, others threatening her to take it down, and just as she feared, they came again. A black car pulled up by the bridge at sunrise. Marcus saw it first. "Go," he said quietly. "Take your car. They're here for me." "I'm not leaving you," Claire said, shaking her head. He looked at her, a small, sad smile crossing his face. "You already saved me. And the story? It's out there now. They can't kill the truth anymore." She started to argue, but he cut her off. "Go, please." After a long pause, she nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus." He looked at the river, sunlight breaking through the fog. "No, thank you." Then he turned and walked toward the car. The men got out, tense and silent. The taller one, the same from the SUV, spoke first. "You should have stayed quiet." Marcus didn't flinch. "Yeah, well, I tried that for half my life. Didn't help much." "Where's the box?" He smiled faintly. "Gone, and so is your secret." The man stepped closer, gun in hand. "You think anyone will believe a story from a bum?" Marcus looked him straight in the eyes. "They already do." The sound of approaching sirens broke through the moment. The man cursed, turning toward the noise. Marcus seized the moment, grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground, and swung it hard. The gun went off, the bullet grazing Marcus's side. He staggered, pain burning through his ribs, but he stayed on his feet. Behind them, police cars screeched to a stop. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. "Drop it! Hands up!" The men froze. One tried to run, but was tackled instantly. Marcus collapsed to his knees, clutching his wound. Claire ran to him from the shadows, shouting for help. Hours later, he woke in a hospital bed. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of a monitor. Claire sat beside him, her eyes red, but smiling faintly. "You made it," she said softly. "Barely," he murmured. "What happened?" "They arrested them. Turns out they'd been under investigation for years. Your story pushed everything into the open." He nodded weakly. "Good." "People are talking about you," she said. "They call you the man with the box. Some even started a fund to help you." Marcus gave a tired laugh. "That's something." He turned his head toward the window. The city outside looked different now, cleaner, lighter somehow. Then his expression softened. "I just wish she was here to see it." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a small tag, the one from Shadow's collar. She placed it on the bedside table. "She is," she said gently. A week later, Marcus walked out of the hospital with a cane and a new jacket someone had donated. Claire drove him to a small park on the edge of town. They stood together under an old oak tree, looking at the quiet pond. "This is where she used to eat," Marcus said, kneeling and setting the tag down under a patch of flowers. He stayed there a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, girl." When he stood, Claire said, "So what will you do now?" He looked at the horizon. "Start over, I guess. Maybe help people who got lost like I did." She smiled. "You know, there's a shelter that could use someone like you." Marcus chuckled. "Guess I'll check it out." They started walking back toward the car side by side, the wind rustling through the trees. As they crossed the street, a boy holding his mother's hand pointed at him. "Mom, look, that's the man from the news." The mother smiled. "Yes, honey, he's the one who helped catch the bad guys." Marcus felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, people weren't looking at him with disgust or pity, but with respect. He didn't say anything, just nodded slightly and kept walking. Claire glanced at him. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, feels like I finally woke up." That night, Marcus stood on the same bridge where everything had begun. The city lights shimmered on the water. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small handful of coins, the last of what he'd carried for years, and tossed them into the river. "Rest easy, Shadow," he whispered. Then he turned and walked away, the faint sound of the water behind him fading into the wind. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't running anymore. He was free.